Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're watching us from. My name is Mary Wanja. I am the content director at iGaming Africa. And today is a very interesting day. We're having a discussion about one of the very important topics in the industry, and that is responsible gambling. Um, I'm joined by very good gentlemen. We have Pisayo, we have Gabriel, we have Ledipo, who will join us in a few. And I'll just want to take each of them to take 2 to 3 minutes to briefly tell us about themselves and what they do. So we can start with Pisayo, then over to Gabriel.
Hey Mary, my name is Chisayo and I'm the CEO of Gamble Alert. Gamble Alert is a non-profit organization focused on player protection in Africa. We do prevention, research, especially for gaming operators and gaming regulators as well, conducting trainings on responsible gambling, player protection measures, and like I said, advising regulators on
We've lost you a couple of bits. Maybe you can come up again.
you lost my
Yes, for a brief time. You can maybe just come up again. Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you now. You can
okay.
proceed.
Like I said, my name is Fisai Okay, and I'm the CEO of Gamble Alert. We are a non-profit organization protecting around regulators services as well for both regulators and operators. That's the work that we do across the continent.
All right, thank you. Over to you, Gabriel. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Thank you very much, Mary, and also good to see you, Fisayo. So my name is Gabriel Joseph. I'm the founder of Gamble Aware NG. We're a non-profit, independent advocacy organization that advocates on player protection. We're based in Nigeria, but we're also operating across several countries in Africa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Today we have the webinar is sponsored by a group of companies that make this possible, and I'll just play a short clip to just appreciate them and recognize them. So, yeah, let's jump to that. Those are our sponsors. We have one in partners, we have Softwares, and we have NetConstruct. The webinar is also powered by two other companies. We have IGA Summit that happened, it's had its inaugural event last year. And we have another event coming up in May 2027. And I'll just play the clip. that is a Gaming Africa Summit that is set for 2027 next year. And then we'll have one more company we call iGaming Consult Africa. And yeah. All right. I see Ladipo has joined. Maybe you can briefly tell us about yourself and what you do before we start the conversation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ladipo Biosia Kolade, and the founder of Gamble Pos. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So the topic today is a very interesting one. We're looking at responsible gambling. Is it just policy or PR? And we also look at protecting minors in this from this underage gambling. And to start the scene, maybe we can just start by the foundation and look at the origin of where it all started. I'll talk to Led Depot. Would you please tell us what are some of the challenges that led to the championing of this responsible gambling, and how has that concept evolved from being just largely compliant to becoming a very core pillar in the industry?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of the webinar today. I'm so excited I'm here and also here with my colleagues as well. So, for responsible gaming, right, I think that the main reason why we are all talking of championing responsible gaming in the industry is based off the fact that it's a growing industry, and also it has come with certain issues and problems, right? And I believe that institutions like ourselves have to position ourselves in ways where we could come up with frameworks and ideas, right, to build something in such a way that players could be protected, right? So basically, that's why we are trying to come up with initiatives and frameworks around responsible gambling, basically to protect vulnerable players and protect minors in the gaming industry. So before now, we got an invitation about the webinar, and we got the topic because based off the topic, and it's something I'm really passionate about. We had like a short survey around minors, right? And part of the survey revealed that um, we put out a survey, and we had 104 people respond to the survey, right? And we found out that 95% of them believe that underage gambling increases addiction risks later in life, while 1 in 4 had already been exposed to gambling before adulthood. Unsurprisingly, right, over 93% called for stronger age verification system, and 8 in 10 want stricter penalties for operators with weak controls, right? So that basically raises a certain level of concern because, again, just last year, a survey was carried out in Enugu across a secondary school where a study was carried out across 796 students, right? And they figured that between ages, students between 15 and 19 found problem behavior already present at a certain age, right? And it doesn't stop there. There was also another research carried out in Nigeria, in a university in Nigeria, amongst 406 students, right? And more than a third are engaged in gaming activities, right? So we see this consistent story, right, in the industry, and we believe that it is just um, important that we come up with initiatives around responsible gaming and see how best we could come up with frameworks to to protect the players basically, and ensure that we are also not focused on harm prevention, right? And prioritize early intervention, because what we see basically is situations where um, a lot of operators or a lot of initiatives like ourselves just want to focus on reducing the harm, right? for us at Gamble Pause, one of the major things we are actually prioritizing is ensuring that we create systems around ensuring that we build a framework around early intervention as opposed to harm prevention. So yeah, so that's basically that about responsible gaming for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ledipo. And when we talk about responsible gambling, we always talk about it as a shared responsibility between, the regulators, the operators, we have the technology providers. It's a collective effort from everybody. Is this collaborative approach actually delivering meaningful results, or does it actually dilute accountability at some point? And how important is independent oversight in ensuring the credibility of these policies and initiatives? We can have
Okay.
this side. Yeah.
Do you want to take that question again? I thought you were talking to that.
I thought you were talking to me.
Okay, so Kisaya, when you speak about responsible gambling, you speak about the collaborative approach from all these regulators, from the operators, just everybody in the industry. At what point is this approach actually delivering results, or is accountability diluted at some point where we get, yeah, is accountability diluted at some point when you have this whole approach, and where does independence in responsible gambling actually improves credibility?
Okay, thank you so much. So when we talk about the cooperation amongst the states, it's not just operators and regulators we're talking about. We're talking about family members, we're talking about loved ones, we're talking about communities, we're talking about advocacy groups, civil society organizations, mental health professionals, the media, everyone who is involved in a community has a role to play. So even if you have the regulators and the operators cooperating and doing so well, hypothetically, you will still not have achieved responsible gambling in its 100% if you remove the remaining layers of the stakeholder groups. And I'll give you a simple example. Since Ladipo started with the underage, I would use that example of the underage as well. So imagine a 15-year-old who uses his parents' device to gamble. Now, you would ask questions around how does this person get access, to a gambling site. But then the registration and all that was done in an adult's name. In fact, the account being used to make withdrawals are in an adult's name. Every other thing. It could, in fact, be that the parents are minors gambling activity. Now, when you ask questions from the operator, especially in fulfillment of the law, to say at what point did you realize that your customer is a minor, and then they investigate the account, they realize the account that they have actually is in the name of an adult, right? So even if the operator had put a preventive measure in place, the family had allowed, so the parents had allowed the child, to go on with gambling activity. So the primary caregivers, who are the parents, sometimes the teachers or other guardians, also have a significant role to play. To talk about the media as well, if the regulator or the operator do their own job, and then the media continues to allow glamorization of gambling. What you do in essence is you are telling the youth and the vulnerable population that gambling is a way of escape from whatever life has thrown at them. So when we talk about how effective collaboration has been in terms of achieving responsible gambling, excellent result because currently we do not have a synergy amongst all of especially because we do not in fact have standardized framework around responsible gambling. Think about very many African countries, and as of 2024, there are about 44 to 45 African countries that are regulating gambling in one form or the other. And then all of these have very fragmented regulations around responsible gambling. So if we cannot even achieve synergy in terms of framework, how much can we achieve in terms of cooperation? That's not to say that we have not made any progress, but it's to say that we have a long way to go in terms of achieving excellence when it comes to cooperation.
All right, thank you. And you mentioned the media and the glamorization of, gambling, and advertising has remained one of the most debated topics in the industry. So, where should the industry draw the line between promoting, the gaming products and ensuring that marketing remains socially responsible? I think I'll take that to Gabriel. Yeah. Where do we draw the line between promoting this gaming product and ensuring that we still remain responsible? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that question. In terms of advertising and just making sure that advertising is socially responsible. So I'll start by saying that advertising is basically what draws people into gaming. So the in terms of advertising, in terms of guns when they are coming into gaming. And I'll give you an example. So when we did a survey, we realized that one of the perceptions in terms of people coming into gaming was that they were coming in for financial gain. And if you juxtapose that with what the industry's expectations of gaming is which is that gaming should only be for entertainment and should not be seen as a source of income. But what we are also realizing in reality is that a lot of adverts promise financial gains. A lot of adverts glamorize gambling as a source of income. So when you look at that in that context, what you then realize is most people are coming in to gaming strictly for financial reasons. And we feel that that is one of the major contributors to some of the problems that we are seeing, especially with at-risk players and problem gamblers. It's because they are not gaming for entertainment, they are simply gaming for financial independence. And that in itself leads to a situation where you have socially irresponsible adverts that are promoting financial gain, adverts that make it look like gambling is a source of income. Gambling is where you should come in and make your first millions. So it's very important that in terms of player protection, in terms of balancing, market responsibility, socially in terms of what is socially acceptable. In terms now, we've also done engagement with some of regulatory. We've done engagement with some of regulators, and one thing we've realized is that there's sort of a gray area in terms of who really gets to regulate gambling adverts. It's neither here nor there. The responsibility does not fully sit with the regulator, and the responsibility does not fully sit with the Advertising Regulatory Council. So it's more of a shared responsibility. And although I know that there is a lot of progress in terms of both parties coming together to sort of work out harmonized frameworks on what should be considered as socially responsible adverts, but I also feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there are also gray areas because when we talk about adverts, there's so many forms of adverts. There's land-based adverts where you see adverts on billboards. There's also online adverts, where people can log on to websites and they see adverts promoting gaming. We feel that the gray area, the worst hit spots is usually online, and that's because it's very difficult to regulate adverts online. You go on some websites, you see all manner of adverts regarding gaming. And another thing we're also noticing is that we're also seeing adverts coming from unlicensed. For instance, we've seen instances where some financial tech platforms are advertising gambling when they are not licensed to. And because they are not licensed to do that, they don't understand the sensitivity or where to draw the line in terms of responsible adverts. So I feel and we feel that a major aspect in terms of player protection, making sure that gaming is ethical, socially sustainable, is in the way we advertise it. Because, like I said, adverts are the entry points for a lot of people. If you do a survey, you'll find out that a lot of people started gaming because of adverts. They saw it on an advert, they saw something pop up on their phone, and that was their entry point. So the perception at that entry point is really important to how the player's life cycle would play out in terms of socially and ethical gaming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for that. And Ladipo, maybe you can tell us beyond advertising, what other methods can operators maybe use to promote their product, but again also champion this responsible gaming policy. Yeah.
Okay, so for adverts, right? I so just to be clear, I don't know if you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Okay. So for adverts, right, I think that it's very important that the operators start to um, advertise responsible gaming tools, right? Because again, we all understand that is responsible gaming is a shared accountability across all stakeholders, and I believe that it should be done evenly. By being done evenly, we need to understand that we need to know what it entails for us to promote responsible gaming on our different platforms on different levels. Having said that, in terms of advertisement, I think that they need to advertise responsible gaming tools more, right? For instance, I had a conversation with some player, and he mentioned that he didn't even know what self exclusion meant, right? So that's basically because there's basically not enough awareness around responsible gaming tools. So if they're able to carry out more awareness, right, players are able to understand how to use these tools when they have a problem. So for the operators, they just need to ensure that while they put out their adverts or their products out there, they should also ensure that they are able to be intentional about how best to use responsible gaming tools and also making it accessible, right, and visible to players, right. I think that in itself would be good. Again, we are seeing a lot of billboards, a lot of content creators talking about gaming and how much you could benefit from indulging. I also believe that the same energy should also be put into prioritizing responsible gaming and how best to use responsible gaming tools. For instance, there's this operator that won, I think he won an award for the best advert at the symposium. I think Bet's Great, right? And it was a well-deserved advert. Why? Because I saw the advert, I saw one of the adverts on TV, and during the advertisement of their product, they actually took time to also explain how to use the responsible gaming tools, which was a responsible gaming tool, which was self-exclusion. So if we're seeing more of that, right, I think in line with advertisement, a lot of players will understand how best to prioritize, how best to use responsible gaming tools whenever they're having any sort of harm or experiencing any sort of harm. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe everybody can have a say in my next question. And that would be we mentioned tools, we have like self exclusion, we have the reality checks, have the deposit limits. What measures have proven to be the most effective in your own perspectives? Which gaps still exist, and what can be improved in all these tools? When you're looking at self exclusion, you look at deposit limits, we look at the reality checks, we look at the all these tools, what gaps are there, what can be improved, yeah, and what is proven to be the most effective. We can start with Visaya, then Gabriel, then Ladipo.
Coincidentally, the tool that is most effective is also the most self understanding. And here's why. Very effective tool, especially for persons who are beginning to notice that it's not consistent with responsible gambling. They are already tilting towards harmful play. As effective as it is, self-exclusion is also a very poor way to judge someone as when I want to self-exclude from a platform. While it could be a case of um, wanting to prevent harm, it could also become a case of unleashing frustration. Say, I want to increase or reduce my level leave your platform. You know, it could also be used as a way to commit fraud, right? And I'll give an example. A person who uses this thing called transfer money from the ordinarily unable to win on, he has to stake the money, but he doesn't want to lose because he knows that if he stakes, he can lose a part of the money or all of the money. So what he does is ask for self-exclusion. Some people want to respond it's money as a way to perpetrate fraud. That's why I said, as effective as it is, it's also a very potent way to commit fraud, demonstration, and all. That would work if not dependent on the operator alone. For instance, if you have a third party, it could be a regulator-led self-exclusion wherever it is coming from. A third-party self-exclusion where you know that this is not a case of wanting to withdraw money from a wallet or what have you. Right? But for me, self-exclusion is still the most important in health. It's just the work very ticket, fantastic. But in terms of which is the most effective, I would still choose self-exclusion.
Thank you. Gabriel?
Thank you very much. Mary, the question was which tools are the most effective in our view? Is that correct?
Yeah, which tools are the most effective? From your perspective, what are some of the gaps that still exist? And from your perspective again, what can be improved to, bridge that gap?
Thank you very much. Fantastic question. For us, the tools that are most effective are actually preventive tools. So when you talk about preventive tools, we're talking about things like AI monitoring software that are embedded in operator platforms that allows them to sieve out and spot out problem gambling or player patterns that are problematic. Those to us are the most effective. But again, what a lot of the tools that are commonly in place now are a bit more reactive. So when we talk about reactive tools, we're talking about tools like self-exclusion, which typically kicks in when harm has already been identified. Deposit limits are also effective, but they are also in a way reactive. And in terms of some of the gaps that we see is, I would say, regulatory enforcement. So if you look at the number of the regulators that we have, there's quite a lot of rules in terms of the sort of tools that should be available to players like self-exclusion, deposit limits, timeouts, and all of that. But the problem we are seeing is not just the fact that we have these rules. The problem mostly is that these rules are not being enforced. Quite a number of operators today still don't have self-exclusion. For those that have self-exclusion, they still run the law. So the law says that if a player self-excludes for a particular period, within that period, they should not be allowed to come back and reopen their account. So we are seeing a lot of instances where a player will request for self-exclusion, and that same player will come back 1 week later and then ask for his account to be reinstated, and he will be allowed. So these are some of the gaps that we are seeing. And I think another gap too is the gap in information. So a lot of people don't even know that these tools exist. And if you look at the responsible gaming section of some of the websites, you will notice that it's buried deep, deep down. In fact, if you don't deliberately search for it, you might never find it. It's the tools are basically hidden from view. So there is some work to be done in terms of promoting these tools, giving players information to let them use and how it can be used. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. But I'll say the major gap is regulatory enforcement and providing information to players that these tools exist.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Ladipo?
So Gabriel has mentioned like the key parts, and what I would want to focus on would basically be the age verification processes, right? Because for me, I believe that that's where the problem starts. I believe that once we are able to solve the problem in terms of underage gambling, I think we're headed towards the right direction. So, yes, they are checks, but are the checks enough? No. Are they effective? No. So I often see conversations around responsible gaming, underage gambling, and everybody talks about it at different panels across different conferences. But we all know the problem. The problem is the fact that children and minors have access to these products. And why do they have access? They have access simply because the onboarding processes are not strict enough. So what I think that we need to do in that aspect is advocate for technologically based age verification systems to be embedded on their products. It's a no-brainer. Like we have countries like the UK have those frameworks in place. We have Ghana. Ghana has a population of 35 million people, and let's say active gamblers of about 19 million people, right? They've put that in place to solve that problem. So is it going to solve it 100%? No. But once we're able to put these mechanisms in place, I believe that we are headed towards the right direction in ensuring that we protect minors. So as Gabriel said, the priority is always should always be um, early intervention, and these are the frameworks around early intervention. So for me, I think one of the major responsible gaming tools, or one of the major frameworks we need to start to focus on after maybe self-exclusion is age verification systems, right? We need to prioritize them. We need to prioritize the minors and ensure that it's not just PR, right? We're not just talking about it. We're actually enforcing these laws, ensuring that these guys are protected. We all know the right things to be done, right? So, and again, the onus is on us, right, for us to advocate. So this is a problem. So there's really no point having to shift blames or say, let's go this way. We already know the answer to this question. We need to ensure that we are able to introduce technologically based age verification systems to protect minors. So for me, that. So that's
Perfect. And looking at underage gambling, I'll go to Fisayo. There was a study recently by Gamble Alert, where in Lagos State they had a study or around 800 students, and we saw that at least 35%, that 5.3% of students had engaged in gambling, and about 68 of this percentage was the male students. So again, we see this underage gambling, and then it comes down to, again to the gender topic of it. So, what does this gender disparity tell us about the drivers of underage gambling? And should prevention strategies just be designed differently? Or, yeah, should they be designed differently for boys and girls? Because you can see like 68% to that's 2% doesn't, you see. Yeah, so Sarah, maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, so just to clarify, that study you referred to was carried out in a local government. So we'll be careful not to make it a representative of the entire Lagos state. We've carried out similar study in a local government in Ogun State, another one in Osun State. Those are for certain local governments, especially places where we have realized that gambling activities amongst the students have been reported to be there. I just needed to clarify that those are done in certain local governments. But I mean, we also understand that there could be a microcosm of the big problem. yes, it is true that we have a higher number of the male child now, gambling, definitely more than the female child. And it's a function of the fact that you see for the male child, we're always thinking about curiosity, the fact that everybody wants to make money, even at a very young age, and all of that. Some of and it goes back to the motivation for gambling. Some persons are gambling because they think that they need to make ends meet. They need to be seen as leaders in the society, and therefore they need to hold. Like we say it on the street, they need to hold back. So a couple of them, and of course, society places certain levels of burden on the male child. So they begin at a very young age. In fact, while engaging with some of these students, they ask you, if you ask us not to gamble, are you saying that we could turn to advanced field fraud? So they think that gambling for them is a legal alternative to crime. So it takes a whole lot having to explain why they should not go into it apart from the um, legal provision. But the worrying part of it is not necessarily in fact that we have more male children who are gambling. We've always had that, and we know that that's a problem that needs to be solved. It is the fact that every time you go out for a survey, you see an increasing number of females, and that's quite concerning because it now means that if we had a problem before, we now have more problems, at hand because almost everybody now wants to be a part of it. So you could find that a teacher even celebrates gambling in a school simply because it brings in a lot of money. In a local government in Oyo State, there were children who were gambling, and then because a teacher was trying to stop them, from the activity, he dealt mercilessly with the teacher and talking about beating up a teacher. So the problem of underage gambling has, to be honest, gone beyond the surface of gambling to even more serious issues around gangsterism. So it feels like you're dealing with a hydra-headed issue here, uh, ranging from the male part. But like I said, the even more worrying case is now that it is no longer a gender thing. It's now everybody wanting to be involved in it. It goes back to glamorization of gambling, seeing gambling as a source of income, a way to make it big.
Thank you. Thank you. And looking at these responsible gambling models, what approaches can we use as because we're in Africa, we work in Africa. What are some of the models that you can maybe adopt, looking at some of the social, economic, and maybe even financial realities of the African uh, person? What are some of these models that can be implemented in our own continent? That's not borrowed, let's say, from abroad and everything. Can have Ladipo speak on that.
So some of the borrowed, so for me, I think technology and ensuring that we're able to build systems, right? Because we're just talking about the problems. We're all talking about the problems. What's the solution? Technology, right? We can't keep going to secondary school for awareness, right? For me, I don't think it is sustainable, and that's why for us we're actually now tilting towards technology, right? How many secondary schools can I possibly visit in Africa, right? So I think that technology is something we were looking at prioritizing, and by prioritizing technology, we are also thinking of how we can reach the locals, the natives that don't speak the universal language like English language, right? We have several languages in Africa. So what I'm thinking is a technology that has provision for local languages in terms of player protection, right? Because again, I see that we have conversations around responsible gaming, we have conversation around self-exclusion, parental control, and the rest. And we understand how it could be advocating, how difficult it could be making the change or being the change. So what we need to start doing is tilting towards that and also embedding these local realities into the solutions. So for us at Gamble Pulse, what we have done is we built an app, right? and it's just like it's a blocking app, just like the self exclusion, the blocking app like BetLocker and Gamban. But what we've done, what is different now, is the fact that we have embedded local realities in the app, right? The app speaks over 40 African languages, right? And also has features like self-exclusion from from licensed and unlicensed platforms, as well as parental control system and also support systems, prioritizing natives, locals by embedding local languages. So for us, that's what we've done in terms of building solutions, local solutions to solve this problem.
Thank you, Gabriel. Something to chip in on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting perspectives from both Fisai and from Ladipo. For me, I always stand on one thing, which is age verification checks and identity checks. I feel like that is the one thing that if operators, if regulators stand on, will really move the needle in terms of underage gambling access. And one of the problems we see is KYC checks are not being done. And that's a problem because I mean, if we look at our community, we have over about 8,000 people that are currently in active counseling with us. About 5 to 6% of them are underage. We have a further 10% of them that told us that they started gambling when they were underage. So it's a bit more prevalent than we think or that society understands. And part of the problems we see is that it's very easy for minors to have access, both online and offline. Online, they can just register at the click of a button. We even had an instance recently where one of the operators was operating what we call one click registration, where you basically just click in just one click, you're registered and you're able to gamble. Not having these KYCs, not having these identity checks is a real problem. The second thing we also identify is that there has to be restrictions on gambling adverts that are targeted at young people. For instance, some adverts should not run at certain times of the day when young people, when minors will be watching these programs. It should not be allowed. It should also not be allowed on certain channels where we also know that young people have access to. The third point for us too is what we'll call whole of society approach. Whole of society approach basically means that everyone is involved, from parental awareness, school education, societal structures like schools, institutions, being involved. It's a big problem in some areas. So a whole of society approach that builds in school, community prevention programs, that would be really helpful in terms of curbing underage gambling. And also lastly is there also has to be operator safeguards in terms of preventing minors from accessing gaming products. And there are a couple of safeguards. There's, like I said, obviously at the beginning, KYC checks, age verification. We have in Nigeria, we have something called NIN, National Identification Number. I don't see a lot of operators using that in terms of their checks because if you use an NIN number, you can easily sieve out those that are underage. So they don't ask for any form of KYC in some of the operator platforms, and that is a problem. And lastly, I also want to really echo what Ladipo said in terms of technology. I mean, if we are doing outreaches, if we are doing awareness, there is a limit to it, but technology is what puts us in control. And we need technology to be able to drive forward. In fact, I was talking to someone yesterday, and the guy came up with this really brilliant idea. He said, what if we had an app, sort of like a face, what if some of the operators built in like a face verification app where, an app that can basically tell your age or at least be able to identify what age bracket that you fall under while registering. So it's that kind of thinking, underpinning these systems with technology. So those kind of things that will help us drive forward in terms of controlling underage access to gaming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. And that brings me to my next question because some of us may be very deliberate in enforcing these responsible gaming policies, but some of us, again, maybe are just ticking boxes. And so, what is that one thing that distinguishes a really responsible, effective, responsible gambling program from those that are just ticking boxes and or just maybe therefore enhancing corporate reputation? I guess I'll start with Isaiah, then Ladipo, then Gabriel. Yeah.
Okay, so most of the responsible gambling programs that we see in Africa, and I say this advisedly, are only to tick boxes, to be honest. But if you allow me, can I just weigh in on the issue of the model that works? I know that Ladipo and Gabriel had mentioned something around that. Uh, for me, maybe I'm a little bit more academic. I'll look at a combination of the Renault model and the total consumption model. Both of them very effective. So if you look at the Renault model, it says that every layer has a responsibility that you have to divide for them. So it's not to talk about it. It's like when you have an organization, you have an organogram. So you have every step having their own responsibility. The total consumption model is talking about the public health approach. It's saying, look, if we want to actually protect the players, then we have to look at the whole population. So you're not solving a problem per individual, you're solving a problem per society. And if you're doing that, it means that from the beginning, at the point of registration, you already are factoring in the society. It means that you are preventing, you're not even saying you're intervening, you're not saying that you are reacting to what's happening. You the the idea of responsible gambling should be that before you even go to a platform, it's like when you want to drive a car, you use your seatbelt. It doesn't matter whether you are harmed or you are not harmed. Before you start, you already are aware what are those tools are available. It doesn't actually make sense that you go ahead to gamble before you learn about tools. It's like learning how to drive after driving. It's impossible, to do that. So for me, I would say that if we approach responsible gambling under those two models, we may be able to achieve a lot in terms of responsible gambling. But back to the issue of ticking boxes, yes, what I would say is this: what the player wants is that he is protected, and what we want is that the player is protected. And rather than saying that gaming companies should move from a compliance um, box to actually doing something. I'm not sure that in the next 5 years we're going to ever get to a place where gaming companies actually on their own will be happy to, reduce gambling activity. Because if you look at total consumption model, that's what it's asking you to do. So it means that when the regulators decide to stand up and put their foot on the ground, it becomes a compliance issue. And then when it becomes a compliance issue, we begin to achieve a lot. So I wouldn't say that Africa should move away from compliance checkbox. I would say that we should in fact expand our compliance scope so that there are more things that need to be done. And then when we begin to see enforcement in that regard, maybe we'll be achieving a lot. Because asking us to move, we should say that every gaming operator has a good view and a reputation to protect.
Thank you very much, Ladipo. You're muted.
Yeah, I think we're good, right? Okay, so thank you very much. So I think that was a very good response from Fisayo, and there's something he mentioned that I feel like was very, very, very intelligent of him. He mentioned the model, the Reno model, right? And it's clear, it's basically shared responsibility evenly across all the stakeholders, right? And for me, still making reference to that model, I believe that the stakeholders need to understand their roles when it comes to responsible gaming, right? What I am saying is a situation where certain stakeholders are switching roles, right? Because in terms of advocacy, right, who is actually advocating, right? Who is in the best position to advocate? We are all on this call. The onus is on us to advocate. It's onus is on us to ensure that the right things are being done in collaboration with the regulators. So, for instance, let me just give an example of the automobile industry. I read an article yesterday, and it just struck, and it was about this basically. The automobile industry became safer, not just by true was not basically just by the 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 caption drive responsibly alone, but through engineering, stronger accountability, and robust safety mechanisms. Now let's move to the aviation industry. It wasn't just um what do they call it? It wasn't just built around systems, but they had to prioritize the black box and stuff like that to ensure that, oh, they have automatic checks, right, to ensure that the systems are well protected. So going down to the gaming industry, responsible gaming shouldn't just be a caption, bet responsibly, right? We need to be held accountable for certain things that are done. In terms of responsible gaming, in terms of responsible gaming tools, in terms of the regulations, in terms of the operators adhering to the laws, who is holding who accountable? These are the questions we're meant to start asking ourselves. In terms of self exclusion, what does the law say? What is being done? In terms of age verification, what is being done? Do you get? So, for me, I just believe that we need to understand and start to prioritize responsible gaming, right? And also ensuring that we understand the roles we all have to play, right? By roles, I know what I'm meant to do. I don't expect I don't expect to have to have a self or try to build something in line of self exclusion, or try to advocate for certain laws in respect to self exclusion, right? What I think I should do is ensure that, oh, prioritize certain advocacy in line of responsible gaming, ensuring that, oh, this is what is expected for me. Oh, this is what is expected of me in terms of arm early intervention, right? That way we're able to build a sustainable gaming ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lady for Gabriel.
Thank you very much. You can hear me, right? This is a very important question you asked there, and again, meaningful contributions from Oladipo and Fisayo. So, for us, what separates an operator in terms of if they are wholeheartedly doing player protection, or for them, if it's a tick box exercise, we have a 7 point system that we use to identify who is doing it as a compliance checklist, or who has a culture of player protection. And that stems from one of the surveys that we are currently running. It's called Player Wellbeing Index, where we identify some of the problem factors facing player protections. And from that survey, we're able to develop a 7 point system to identify operators that are positioning player protection at the core of what they do. The first point that we look at is their verification process. So, do they have age verification systems in place? Do they have robust identity checks, or are they relying on self declaration of birth, which we see quite often? Do they have regular tests? Do they also audit their age verification system? So that's under point one, which is strong age verification system. The second one is, how well do they commit to early harm detection? To commit to early harm detection, you have to be able to invest in things like AI and predictive player protection systems. So these systems, this algorithm helps these operators identify players that are exhibiting risky behavior, like players that are chasing losses, players that are playing for an extended periods, players that are having erratic deposit patterns, long gambling sessions, and players whose playing pattern are not suggestive of someone that is in control. So again, having an early harm detection system is part of our pointers. The third is commitment to safer gaming tools. So when you say safer gaming tools, we're talking about the whole suite. We have deposit limits, we have loss limits, we have limits around how much a player can deposit, how much a player can also take out. So these are some of the things. Also, reality checks. So, for instance, if a player has spent too much time on the system should be able to prompt the player to say, "Do you want to take a break?" And most importantly, self-exclusion options that actually work. The fourth point is their commitment to staff training. I know some of the operators are actually committed to that. They do train their staff once in a while. So that commitment to training their staff, to keeping them upskilled, to be able to identify harm is again a pointer in terms of if an operator is wholeheartedly putting player protection at the center of what they do.
The fifth point that we use in measuring operator effectiveness in terms of player protection is their responsible marketing. Does their adverts, does it target minors? Do they target vulnerable groups, whether directly or indirectly? Do they position misleading messages, like, when I talked about earlier that some operators advertise gambling as a means to solving financial problems? We look at all of that. The sixth point is around leadership commitment. So is player protection treated for them as a business priority, or is it just a compliance requirement, like you said, something that just needs to be a checkbox or a tick box that just needs to be ticked? Leadership commitment is really critical for companies or organizations that are positioning player protection at their core. And the last is about their transparency, their level of transparency and accountability. So when you talk about transparency, you think about things like, do they share, again, as part of their adverts, do they share information about gambling risk? Are these operators known to support research? Are they known to support treatment? Are they known to support prevention programs? Do they commit a part of their budget into responsible gaming awareness? And again, are these operators, or some of these operators, do they measure success by revenue, or do they measure it by their player well-being? Because one point that we always try to make is that when your players are healthy, your players play longer. When your players play longer, your players have a longer lifespan value and an overall higher lifetime value to you. But when you have unhealthy players, you start seeing higher churn rates. I heard from the conference that we just came back recently from that some operators are seeing churn rates at around 40 to 50%, which is really quite high. If you have a churn rate of 30% plus, it definitely means that your player or your cost acquisition per player is increasing. And again, that is not sustainable. And the point I'm making here is that there's actually a business case, a strong business case to have strong player protection at your core. Because if your players are healthy, your players play longer. And just lastly on this point, players to also say that players, what you're simply doing is you're releasing unhealthy players back to society. You're passing the burden of unhealthy players to society. And I'll tell you how society absorbs that. They absorb it through family and friends that have to carry the emotional and financial burden of an unhealthy player. They absorb it through schools that a lot of people are dropping out because they can't concentrate or because they're having problems. Even financial systems collapse. Like over 99% of people that come to us for help have debts. So if you're not taking care of your players, I can assure you that you're simply passing that burden back to society. So there is a business case for protecting your players and having player protection at your core. Thank you.
That is powerful, Gabriel. And I see our time is far much spent, but I'd love to ask, what does success look like in responsible gambling? To you, Fisayo, to you, Gabriel, and to even you, Ladipo. Uh, what will the industry be that you'll be able to say that we're doing good, we are having some progress in these initiatives and policies? And then maybe as you answer that, you can also give your closing remarks. And yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My response will be my closing remark. I think that the only reason we're able to achieve so much in terms of anti-money laundering is because we didn't move away from compliance. In fact, compliance is the center of it. If we want to achieve anti-problem gambling, as I would love to call it, then we have to take it that seriously as well. There is no gaming operator that we are aware of who truly, apart from those who have a culture from outside Nigeria or outside Africa who are doing something around it, who is not currently thinking about revenue first, especially because the regulators are making it so. So if we want to
Mm.
achieve really responsible gambling, compliance has to be really, really high. It has to be as serious as we take anti-money laundering.
I think I'm going next. So for me, I believe collaboration. I think that we need to collaborate. Africa has to see us as one. I'm very big on collaborations, and that's why of late we've been having a lot of partnerships and collaborations, right? Because I see large organizations, I see everyone working in silos, the operators having to do their thing, Gamble Pause trying to do his thing, Gamble Aware trying to do his own thing, Gamble Allah doing his thing, Gamble Zambia, Gam 8 Zambia is doing a thing, right? For me, success is going to look like, in terms of RG, it's going to be collaboration across everyone in the continent, where we're able to collaborate on research, share data, share knowledge, and see how we could speak to regulators with one voice, right? And see how we could also design frameworks that actually work. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Mary, my this thing timed out, but it seems that the question was what does success look like for player protection? Was that the question? Was my network timed out? Sorry.
Yes, according to you and from your perspective, what does success in responsible gambling look like?
Well, my network is really bad, but if you can hear me, I think success to me would just be a where player protection is not just spoken, and that's because everywhere we go, everyone seems to say player protection is a priority, but it's mostly on paper, it's mostly through words, but never through action. So success to me would be an industry that talks about player protection, but actually actions it. Thank you.
Thank you, and there you have it. So, responsible gambling cannot be measured by, the policy is written, the campaigns launched, the messages displayed. It is actually measured by the true impact it has on our players, to protect players, to prevent harm, and to even create a safer gambling environment. So, I want to thank you, all our panelists, and our audience for joining us for this conversation. And I hope you got a thing or two. And yes, so the webinar was brought to you by different companies. We have iGaming Consult Africa, we have IJ Summit 2027 that's supposed to take place next year in Nairobi in May. And yes, we also have our webinar sponsors. We have Software, Swan Partners, and Batch Construct. And as we depart, I'd want to leave you with some videos. And just as we appreciate our sponsors. So until the next time, bye, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.